You arrived in America as a refugee. This country offered you everything: safety, opportunity, even a seat in Congress. Yet you've spent your entire career defrauding it. Ilhan Omar's mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. The woman who'd once declared America racist on the House floor, who'd brushed off 9/11 as some people did something, who'd built her entire career attacking the very nation that saved her, was silent. Ted Cruz didn't even blink. He had the calm demeanor of a Harvard-trained prosecutor who'd meticulously built this case over months. Just 2 hours earlier, she had walked in, fully prepared to play the victim. She had no idea she was actually walking into a trial. If you believe in accountability, then you're definitely in the right place. Make sure to subscribe now. The Senate hearing room was absolutely packed, standing room only. Cameras were everywhere. Ilhan Omar entered with her squad allies right behind her: AOC, Tlaib, and Presley. A clear show of solidarity. She took her seat, adjusted her hijab, and lifted her chin. Another Republican witch hunt, she thought. They've been trying to take me down since I got here. It never works. She had survived every attack, turning every accusation into proof of their Islamophobia. Ted Cruz sat across from her, his reading glasses on, with a stack of documents piled in front of him. Omar almost let out a smile. Ted Cruz, Mr. Cancun. This will be easy, she thought. She didn't see what was actually in those documents: FEC filings stretching back years, immigration records, and tax returns that just didn't add up. 5 years of painstaking research, all meticulously documented and organized. The chairman then called the hearing to order. Ted slowly removed his glasses, then looked directly at her. "Congresswoman Omar," he began, "you're here today to answer questions about your campaign finances." He paused. "I want to be clear about something before we begin." He held up a single document. "I have your FEC filings, your tax records, and your immigration timeline. Everything is fully documented." Omar's smirk flickered for a moment. "So let's skip the part where you accuse me of Islamophobia and just go straight to the numbers," he continued. The squad members exchanged worried glances. This clearly wasn't going to be like the other hearings. Ted Cruz reached for his folder. The room instantly fell silent. Not just quiet, but a profound silence. It was the kind of silence that truly presses against your ears. The kind where you could actually hear the soft hum of the ventilation system, the almost imperceptible buzz of the camera equipment, and the collective breathing of 200 people who had all simultaneously stopped moving. His hands moved with deliberate precision. These were the hands of a man who had argued before the Supreme Court 9 times, who had won national debate championships, and who had spent his entire career building up to moments exactly like this one. He carefully extracted a stack of documents. These were FEC filings, thick and official-looking, their weight clearly visible as he set them on the table. The thud of the stack echoed through the chamber. Omar's eyes intently tracked the documents. For just a fraction of a second, a tiny fraction, the cameras caught something flicker across her face. It wasn't fear, not yet, but it was the first distant recognition that this might be different. "Let's start with the money, Congresswoman." Ted's voice was calm, unhurried, the voice of a man who had all day and fully intended to use every minute of it. "Specifically, your campaign's relationship with the East Street Group." He picked up the first document, holding it at an angle so the cameras could clearly see the official FEC letterhead. "The East Street Group," he stated, "is a political consulting firm founded in 2018. He paused, allowing the silence to build. "Founded by Tim Minette," he continued. Another pause. "Who is now your husband?" In the gallery, someone audibly shifted. The sound of fabric rustling against a wooden seat was incredibly loud in the absolute stillness. Omar's expression, however, remained perfectly composed. That was the mask she had perfected over years of controversy. The slight tilt of her chin, the almost bored look, all seemed to say, "I've heard this before. You're just wasting everyone's time." But beneath the table, hidden from the cameras, hidden from the gallery, hidden from everyone except the woman sitting right next to her lawyer, her right hand had actually begun to grip her thigh. She didn't even realize she was doing it. Ted began reading from the filing, his voice flat and clinical, truly the voice of a forensic accountant presenting evidence. Between 2019 and 2022, your campaign paid the East Street Group $2,800,000, he stated. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. That's $2.8 million. He then sat down the document. Let me put that number in perspective for everyone watching at home, he offered. The median household income in Minnesota's 5th District, the district you represent, is $42,000 per year. Your campaign paid your husband's company 66 times what your average constituent earns in a year. He let that statement sink in. In the gallery, a woman in the third row brought her hand to her mouth. A man near the aisle slowly shook his head. $2.8 million to your husband. A whisper seemed to pass through the room. Omar, with a practiced gesture of dismissal, tilted her head. Campaign consulting is a standard expense, Senator, she said. Every campaign in America, every campaign pays consultants. Ted's voice cut through hers. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it was just final, like a door quietly closing. You know, not every campaign ends up paying their spouse almost $3 million. He pulled out all this comparison data, a chart and a bunch of numbers, the exact kind of visual that would dominate cable news for weeks. The average congressional campaign, he explained, spends about $100,000 on consulting. $100,000. That's the industry standard, and it's well documented. He then held up the chart. You spent $2.88 million on your husband's company, he stated. He did the math slowly, very deliberately, making absolutely sure everyone in the room could follow along. That's 28 times the average. 28 times what normal campaigns pay, but paid to your husband. He then sat down the chart. Bien. The single word just hung there in the air. Omar's lawyer leaned right over and whispered something to her. She shook her head, just slightly. It was a tiny movement. The movement of someone who still truly believed she could handle everything. The East Street Group provides comprehensive campaign services, she began. Her voice was smooth, clearly practiced. Those services included media consulting, digital strategy, and travel coordination. These are complex operations, but what services specifically justify 28 times the industry average? Ted's question cut through her explanation just like a scalpel. What exactly did your husband's company do that was worth $2.8 million? He pressed. I'd like some specifics. Line items, he added. Deliverables. Silence filled the room. Omar's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. The FEC filings detail it, she finally managed. The FEC filings show payments, Ted countered. They don't, however, show what those payments were for. So I'm asking you, under oath, he pressed. What exactly did $2.8 million buy? Meanwhile, in the control room, the C-SPAN director leaned forward intently. Camera 2, close up on Omar, he instructed. Hold it. The camera lens tightened, focusing in. Every viewer at home could now clearly see what the gallery members couldn't. It was the thin sheen of moisture that had appeared on Omar's forehead, and the slight tremor at the corner of her left eye. "I don't have the specific invoices in front of me," she began, but Ted immediately cut her off. "I do." Ted picked up yet another stack of papers, setting it down with a resounding thud. "Your campaign's travel expenses," he declared. "Hundreds of thousands of dollars, all paid to your husband's firm for campaign travel." He started reading from the invoices slowly. Each destination landed like a separate, pointed accusation. Miami, March 2020, $8,000. He flipped a page. Caribbean, June 2020, $12,000. Another page. Paris, September 2020, $14,000. He set the stack of papers down with a thump. "Congresswoman," he began, "I've run plenty of campaigns myself. I know what real campaign travel looks like," he continued. "It looks like Iowa in January, shaking hands with people at diners. It looks like New Hampshire town halls held in high school gymnasiums. It looks like long bus tours through districts where people can barely afford to heat their homes." He slowly shook his head. "It certainly doesn't look like Paris. It doesn't look like the Caribbean. And it definitely doesn't look like luxury hotels, funded by donors who believed they were supporting democracy." Omar's voice rose slightly. It was the first noticeable crack in her calm composure. "These accusations are based on these—" she started, but Ted cut her off. "These aren't accusations." Ted held up the documents, the official FEC seal clearly visible. "These are your own filings, your own numbers, documents you yourselves submitted to the federal government," he stated. "I'm not making accusations here. I'm simply reading what you reported," he clarified. He then set the papers down. "But it actually gets even more interesting." His voice dropped, his tone shifting from that of a harsh prosecutor to a compelling storyteller, effortlessly drawing everyone in. "You began paying the East Street Group back in 2019. You then married Tim Manette in 2021. He paused for dramatic effect. "But according to multiple reports, I might add, that you have never denied, your relationship with Tim Manette began much earlier," he revealed. And he then picked up newspaper clippings, tabloid headlines, and photographs. "While you were still married to your previous husband, while Tim Manette was still married to his wife, while both of you were destroying your families, you were also paying his company with donor money," he pressed. Omar's lawyer stood up quickly. "Senator, this line of questioning is—" he started, but Ted cut him off sharply. "Sit down." Ted's voice was sharp and clear. It was final. The Congresswoman's personal life became this committee's business the very moment she used campaign funds to pay her boyfriend, who later became her husband, almost $3 million. The lawyer hesitated, then looked over at Omar. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. He slowly sat back down. Ted then turned his attention back to Omar. "Let me explain what this situation looks like to a federal prosecutor," he said. "And I happen to know, because I used to work with federal prosecutors. I know exactly how they think," he added. He leaned forward just slightly. "A married congresswoman begins an affair with a married consultant. She then starts paying his company enormous sums of money from her campaign account. He divorces his wife, who, by the way, has publicly stated that she was completely blindsided by the affair. She divorces her husband, too. They then get married." He slowly shook his head. "Congresswoman, that is not campaign consulting. That's using donor money to fund an affair," he stated bluntly. "That's paying your lover with contributions from people who genuinely thought they were supporting democracy." He paused once more. "There's a legal term for that," he announced. The entire room collectively held its breath. "Fraud." The single word landed like a bomb exploding in the gallery. Gasps erupted, followed by murmurs. The chairman's gavel tapped once, desperately trying to restore order. Omar's composure crumbled for just a moment, just long enough for the cameras to capture something raw flashing in her eyes. It was fear, anger, the look of someone who'd just realized the ground beneath her feet wasn't as solid as she thought. "I don't have to sit here and be subjected to—" "Actually, you do." Ted's voice was calm, almost gentle, with the gentleness of someone who knows they hold all the cards. "You're under oath. You're before this committee due to a lawful subpoena, and refusing to answer questions isn't an option." He straightened his papers. "Besides, Congresswoman, I'm just getting started." He reached for the next stack of documents, because those consulting payments are just about money. What we're going to discuss next, however, is about something far more fundamental. He held up a photograph, a yearbook photo, two teenagers smiling at the camera. It's about how you even got to this country in the first place. The color drained from Ilhan Omar's face. She knew what was coming, and for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. 2.8 million to her husband. Caribbean vacations billed as campaign travel. Like this, if you're tired of politicians treating donor money like personal ATMs, Ted Cruz set down the yearbook photograph. The image was grainy, a scanned copy of a decades-old high school publication, but it was clear enough. Two young people smiling. The caption beneath their faces identified them as siblings. Omar's eyes locked onto the photograph like a weapon pointed at her chest, which, in a way, it was. 1995. Ted's voice softened now, almost reflective, like someone telling a story. "You arrived in America as a refugee from Somalia, 12 years old, fleeing a civil war that had destroyed your country. Your family had spent 4 years in a refugee camp in Kenya, 4 years of uncertainty, of fear, wondering if you would ever be safe again." He paused. "And then America opened its doors, took you in, gave you something that millions of people around the world can only dream of, a chance." The gallery went absolutely silent. Even Omar's most ardent critics found themselves leaning forward, completely caught up in the narrative. You came to this country with nothing, and this country gave you everything. Safety when you had none. Education when you had no future. Opportunity when your homeland offered only death. Ted picked up the photograph again. "And then, in 2009, you married this man." He held up the image. Ahmed Nora Elm, a British citizen who attended North Dakota State University briefly before returning to the United Kingdom. He set down the photograph and picked up a document. "But before you married him, Congresswoman, you knew him in another relationship." He held up the yearbook page. "Edison High School, Minneapolis. This is you. And this is Ahmed Elmeh, listed in the school records as brother and sister." Those words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. Siblings. Ted let the word hang. "That's what the official records show. That's what your high school documented. Brother and sister." Omar's voice cut in, sharp, desperate. "He is not my brother. This conspiracy theory has been debunked multiple times by then. Explain the school records." Ted's voice was calm, patient. It was the patience of a predator who knows his prey has nowhere to run. School records don't just create themselves. Congresswoman, someone provided that information. Someone told Edison High School that you and Ahmed Elmeh were siblings. Was it your family? Was it you? He picked up another document and explained this. In 2009, Ahmed Elma, a British citizen living in London, suddenly appears in Minneapolis, marries you, and then almost immediately returns to London. He looked at her. Why would someone fly across an ocean, marry their sister, and then immediately leave? Omar's lawyer stood again. This is outrageous. The Congresswoman has addressed these baseless. Sit down, Ted's voice hardened, or I will have the sergeant-at-arms remove you from this chamber. The Congresswoman is under oath. She can answer for herself. The lawyer looked at the chairman. The chairman nodded once. He sat. Ted turned back to Omar. Let me explain for everyone watching why this matters. He held up an immigration document. Marriage fraud is a federal crime. If an American citizen marries a foreign national for the purpose of evading immigration law, for example, to help a sibling obtain residency benefits they wouldn't otherwise qualify for. That's a felony. He set down the document, punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. And in cases involving immigration fraud, it can mean deportation of the naturalized citizen who committed the fraud. He let that sink in. In the gallery, the squad members exchanged glances. AOC's face had gone pale. Tahib was whispering urgently to Presley. So, let me ask you directly, Congresswoman, under oath, is Ahmed or Sahed Elmi your biological brother? A heavy silence followed. Omar's hands were visibly trembling now. The camera captured every single tremor. He is not my brother. Her voice was tight, controlled, yet something within it had unmistakably fractured. So why do the school records then list you as siblings? There was some confusion when my family first arrived. The documentation itself was a source of confusion. Ted then picked up the yearbook once more. For 4 entire years, your high school records showed Ahmed Elma as your brother. That's 4 years of confusion. 4 years where nobody ever corrected this supposed error. He slowly shook his head. That isn't confusion, Congresswoman. That's an official record, one that directly contradicts what you're telling this committee right now, under oath. He then set down the yearbook. Allow me to walk you through the timeline, because timelines really do matter. Timelines always reveal the truth. He pulled out a printed chronology, meticulously organized. This was the result of months of research. The year, 2002. You marry Ahmed Hirsi, a Somali-American man. Together, you have 2 children. You build a family. He then pointed to the very next entry. In 2008, you divorce Ahmed Hirsi. Moving to the next entry. The year, 2009. You marry Ahmed Elma, the same man your high school records listed as your brother, a British citizen. And the next entry reads, in 2011. While still legally married to Ahmed Elmi, you have a 3rd child. The father? Ahmed Hirsi, the man you had divorced. Not Ahmed Elmi, not your legal husband at the time. He then looked directly up. You were married to one man, yet having children with another, all at the same time. He then slowly set down the chronology. In 2012, you reunite with Ahmed Hirsi, beginning to live together as a family once more, all while still legally married to Ahmed Elmi. He shook his head, a slow, deliberate movement. Then, 2017, the year you decided to run for the Minnesota State Legislature, the year journalists also started asking some very pointed questions. That very same year, quite coincidentally, I'm sure, you finally filed for divorce from Ahmed Elmi. He held up the divorce decree for all to see. A divorce granted without Ahmed Elmi ever being present. without anyone being able to locate him, and without any evidence he was even informed of the proceedings. He then looked directly at Omar. "Congresswoman, where is Amdi Elmi?" Her voice was now barely above a whisper. She said, "I don't know where my ex-husband," before Ted leaned forward, sharply asking, "Your ex-husband? Or perhaps your brother? Because, frankly, you cannot have it both ways. Either the school records are completely wrong, and he truly was your husband, or the school records are correct, and you actually married your brother." He then paused for a moment. "And if you married your brother simply to help him obtain immigration benefits, then that's far more than just fraud. That, Congresswoman, is a betrayal." His voice then dropped to a more serious tone. "A betrayal of the very immigration system that once saved your own life. The system that took in a 12-year-old girl from a war zone and generously gave her a future. The system that millions of people across the world pray every single day just to access." He shook his head. "And yet, you allegedly defrauded it. All for your brother, if indeed that's truly what he is." Omar's eyes were now glistening, offering the very first sign of tears. However, whether these were tears of shame or fear, or even a calculated strategy, absolutely no one could tell. "I came to this country with absolutely nothing. And yet, this country gave you everything." Ted's voice had now hardened considerably. Any gentleness in his tone was completely gone. "Safety, education, opportunity, even a seat in the United States Congress. And yet the evidence suggests you repaid America by committing fraud against the very system that saved your life." He then carefully gathered the documents. "Congresswoman, you are not a refugee success story. If these allegations turn out to be true, you are certainly not a symbol of what immigration truly makes possible." He looked directly into her eyes. "You are a fraud, someone who ruthlessly exploited the compassion of an entire nation to enrich herself and her family through federal crimes." He then reached for the next stack of papers. "However, defrauding the immigration system isn't the sole way you've demonstrated contempt for this country. Let's now talk about what you said regarding the worst day in American history." Omar's head dropped just slightly, all defiance visibly draining from her posture. She knew exactly what was coming next, and she also knew she had no defense whatsoever. She married her brother simply to cheat the very system that had saved her own life. Please consider this if you believe America truly deserves better than this." Ted Cruz then pulled out a single sheet of paper. He didn't even need to explain what that paper was. The words printed on it had been replayed literally millions of times, had sparked outrage across the entire nation, and had ultimately defined Ilhan Omar in the minds of many Americans who had never even heard of her before. But now, he was going to make her hear those words again. Right there in that room, under oath, with absolutely no escape. The date, April 23rd, 2019. His voice was quiet now, almost reverent in its tone. It was the voice of someone carefully approaching sacred ground. "You are speaking at a fundraiser for the Council on American Islamic Relations, known as KIR, in Los Angeles." He then looked down at the transcript. "And there, you say the following impactful words." He began reading slowly, ensuring each word was distinct, each syllable given its full and deliberate weight. KIR was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. He then slowly sat down the paper. An absolute silence filled the room. "Some people did something." He repeated the words, "Let them hang in the air like an accusation." Let me tell you what "some people did something" truly means to the families watching this hearing right now. His voice dropped to a near whisper. The entire room leaned forward, straining to hear. September 11th, 2001. It was a Tuesday morning. Clear skies stretched over New York City. Clear skies over Washington. Clear skies over Pennsylvania. He paused. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 46 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower. Then, at 9:37, American Airlines Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. By 10:03, United Flight 93, after passengers bravely fought back against the hijackers, crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. He looked up. 2,977 people were murdered that day. Not just killed, but deliberately murdered by terrorists who aimed to bring America to its knees. His voice cracked ever so slightly, just enough to show this wasn't mere rhetoric. This was real. Fathers kissed their children goodbye that morning and never made it home. Mothers called their families from burning buildings, whispering, "I love you one last time." Firefighters ran up the stairs of buildings they knew might collapse, driven by the people they had to save. First responders breathed toxic air until it killed them years later, refusing to leave until everyone was accounted for. He paused. "And you?" He looked at Omar, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You called it." And here he snorted, "Some people did something." In the gallery, a man in the back row slowly stood up. His face was contorted, caught between grief and rage. A woman beside him, perhaps his wife, pulled him back down, whispering urgently. He wore a pin, a small American flag, with 2 towers, a 9/11 family member watching. Omar's voice came quickly, defensively. That quote was taken completely out of context. What I was trying to say, what context makes those words acceptable? Ted's voice rose, not quite shouting, but filling the entire room. What context makes it appropriate to describe the worst terrorist attack in American history as something? What context justifies minimizing the murder of nearly 3,000 Americans to "some people did something"? He picked up a folder filled with newspaper clippings. After your comments, 9/11 families responded. Let me read you exactly what they said. He read, Nicholas Harros Jr. lost his mother, Frances. He said, Congresswoman Omar, your words are offensive. Your words hurt. Please know that your words matter. He turned the page. Deborah Burlingame lost her brother Charles, the pilot of American 77. She stated, she minimized what happened. She diminished the people who died. Another page. Nick Harros, speaking again at the 9/11 memorial ceremony, addressed you directly. He said, some people did something today. I am here to respond to you exactly who did what to whom. Madam, objectively speaking, we know who and what was done. There is no moral equivalency to those who attacked us. Ted carefully set down the clippings. He said, these are people who watched their family members die. Congresswoman, these are people who held funerals for bodies never found, who still wake up every September 11th with a hole in their hearts that will never heal. He paused, and their elected representative, a member of the United States Congress, described the murder of their families as, he snorted, something. Omar's voice was strained. I have always honored the victims of September 11th. Honored them? Ted's voice sharpened. You honored them by minimizing the attack, using the most dismissive language possible to describe their deaths. By reducing the most traumatic day in modern American history to, some people did something. He shook his head. Here's what I truly cannot understand, Congresswoman, and believe me, I have tried. I have genuinely tried to understand. He stood up, walking slowly toward her table. You came to America as a refugee. You fled Somalia because of terrorism, civil war, and the violence that made your homeland uninhabitable. He stopped just a few feet from her. You know what terrorism does to a country. You've seen it firsthand. You've lived it. You were a child in a refugee camp because of it. He looked down at her. And yet, when Americans experienced terrorism, when nearly 3,000 innocent people were murdered on our own soil, your response was, some people did something. His voice dropped. Is American suffering somehow less important than other suffering? Are American lives worth less than Somali lives? Do American tears simply not count? Omar's eyes were wet now. The tears had begun to fall. That's not what I... Then what did you mean? Ted gestured at the cameras, at the gallery, and at the world watching. The 9/11 families are watching right now, Congresswoman. The children who grew up without parents, the parents who had to bury their children, the husbands and wives who became widows and widowers in a single devastating mourning. Explain it to them. Tell them what you really meant. Tell them why the murder of their loved ones deserved nothing more than that dismissive phrase. Some people did something. Silence. Omar's mouth moved, but no words came out. Ted nodded slowly. You can't, because there is no explanation. You said what you truly believe. American tragedy doesn't move you the way other tragedies do. American pain doesn't even register with you. He walked back to his seat. This country saved your life, Congresswoman. It took in a frightened girl from a war zone and gave her everything. Safety, education, a seat in Congress. He sat down, and you still can't even bring yourself to properly acknowledge its worst day. He reached for the next stack of documents. But disrespecting American tragedy isn't even the most serious offense. Let's talk about how you've cheated the American people directly. Let's talk about your taxes. Some people did something. 3,000 Americans murdered, and she couldn't even say the words terrorist attack. Share this with everyone who will never forget. Ted pulled out a stack of tax documents. The papers were official, stamped, authenticated. The kind of documents that ended careers when they contained what these contained. Let's talk about your federal tax returns, Congresswoman. Specifically, the years 2014 and 2015. Omar's lawyer rose immediately. Tax returns are confidential. This committee has no jurisdiction to... These documents were obtained through proper legal channels pursuant to this investigation. Ted's voice was calm, final. The committee has jurisdiction. This has been litigated and decided. Sit down. The lawyer looked at the chairman. The chairman nodded. He sat. Ted held up the first return. 2014, your federal tax return, filed with the Internal Revenue Service under penalty of perjury. He read from the document. Filing status, married. Filing jointly. He looked up. Spouse, Ahmedahers. He set down the document and picked up another. The problem, Congresswoman, is that in 2014 you were not married to Ahmed Hersi. He held up a marriage certificate. In 2014 you were still legally married to Ahmed Nur Sahed Elme, the British citizen, the very man your high school listed as your brother. You didn't divorce him until 2017. He set down the certificate. So, let me be very clear about what happened here. You signed a federal document under penalty of perjury, claiming to be married to Ahmed Hersi. You filed jointly with him. You claimed the tax benefits that come with married filing jointly status. He paused. While you were legally married to someone else. The silence in the room was absolute. That's not a clerical error, Congresswoman. That's not a paperwork mix-up. That's fraud. He pulled out the relevant statute, read from it. 26 U.S. Code Section 7201. Any person who willfully attempts in any manner to evade or defeat any tax imposed by this title or the payment thereof shall, in addition to other penalties provided by law, be guilty of a felony, and upon conviction thereof shall be fined not more than $100,000 or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. He set down the statute. Filing a false tax return is a federal crime. You signed your name. You certified the information was true. You claimed to be married to a man who was not your legal husband. He held up the second return, and you did it again in 2015. Another false return. Another false claim of marriage. Another federal crime. He set both returns on the table. 2 separate years. 2 separate false filings. 2 separate felonies. Omar's voice was tight, controlled, but something in it had broken. The IRS reviewed this matter. They assessed penalties, which I paid. The matter is, the IRS assessed civil penalties, Dad. Ted cut through. Which you paid. That's true. But let me explain what that really means, and what it doesn't mean. He leaned forward. Paying a penalty doesn't erase the underlying crime. It means the IRS chose not to pursue criminal charges. It doesn't mean you didn't commit fraud. It means they decided not to prosecute you. He shook his head. And let me explain how this works for normal Americans, for your constituents, for the regular people watching at home. His voice hardened. If a regular citizen files a false tax return, claims to be married to someone they're not married to, claims benefits they're not entitled to, what happens to them? He answered his own question. They face criminal charges. They go to prison. Their lives are destroyed. Their families are torn apart. Their futures are ruined. He pointed at Omar. But a congresswoman, you pay a fine and keep your seat. You commit the same crime that would destroy an ordinary American's life, and you just walk away. You still vote on laws. You still collect your salary. You still lecture your constituents about justice. He leaned back comfortably. Congresswoman, your entire career has been spent talking about justice, about equality, and how the system treats people differently based on who they are, with some gaining advantages, others don't. He paused for a moment. Yet, here you are, proving your point exactly. The system does treat people differently. It treated you far better. You committed fraud that would put your constituents behind bars, and still, you remain in Congress. He shook his head slowly. That's not justice at all. That's pure privilege. The privilege of power. The privilege of having the right connections and identity to simply sidestep consequences. Omar's face had turned completely ashen. Her hands, gripping the table's edge, were white-knuckled. I made mistakes in my filings, she said. Mistakes? Ted's voice rose sharply. A mistake is forgetting to include a W-2 form. A mistake is misremembering a deduction. Filing joint tax returns for 2 straight years with a man who wasn't your legal husband? That's no mistake. That's a deliberate choice to claim benefits you simply weren't entitled to. He then gathered the documents. Congresswoman, you knew exactly who you were married to. You knew Ahmed Elmi was your legal spouse. And you deliberately chose to file with Ahmed Hirsi instead, because it was convenient, because it fit the story you wished to tell. He stacked the papers neatly. No, that's not a mistake. That's fraud. And the fact that you merely paid a fine and kept your job just proves what everyone watching already understands. There are truly two sets of rules in this country, one for people like you and one for everyone else. He reached for the final stack of documents. But tax fraud, that's a crime against the American Treasury. What we're about to discuss next is a crime against American security. Congresswoman, let's talk about your foreign connections. Let's talk about Qatar. Omar's already pale face went stark white. She filed taxes with the wrong husband for 2 years in a row. That's not a mistake. That's fraud. Like this. If you're tired of politicians living by different rules, Ted Cruz then spread a brand new set of documents across the table. These included maps, financial records, meeting logs, and travel itineraries. The kind of documentation that took months to compile and only seconds to destroy a career. Congresswoman, let's talk about your foreign connections. His voice had changed again, becoming colder now, the tone of someone approaching the most serious accusation. Specifically, let's talk about Qatar. Omar straightened up slightly. It was the first sign of defiance from her in several minutes. Qatar is a U.S. ally, but Qatar also harbors the leadership of Hamas. Ted's voice cut through hers like a sharp blade. Qatar funds Al Jazeera, which regularly broadcasts anti-American propaganda across the entire Middle East. Qatar has been sanctioned by its own neighbors, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt, for supporting terrorism. He then picked up an intelligence report. According to multiple U.S. intelligence assessments, Qatar is one of the largest funders of extremist organizations worldwide. He set the report back down. And somehow, Congresswoman, you've become their absolute favorite member of Congress. He pulled out more financial records. Qatar has spent more money lobbying the United States government than almost any other foreign nation. Hundreds of millions of dollars, and a disproportionate amount of that attention, that money, that influence, has focused squarely on you. He began to read from the documents. Organizations funded by Qatar have donated to PACs supporting your campaigns. Lobbyists aligned with Qatar have promoted your positions here in Washington. And Qatar-linked media have defended you against every scandal, every accusation, and every investigation. He looked up at her. When? The question hung heavy in the air. Why is the government of Qatar so deeply interested in a congresswoman from Minnesota? What exactly do they get for their investment? Omar's voice was sharp. I am not funded by... Let me show you what I mean. Ted pulled out a detailed chronology. Every single time a bill comes before Congress that would sanction Qatar, you oppose it. Every time your colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, call out Qatar's support for terrorism, you remain silent. When Israel, America's closest ally in the region, is attacked by Hamas, you condemn Israel. He shook his head. Your positions align perfectly, absolutely perfectly, with Qatar's foreign policy objectives. It's almost as if someone simply handed you a script. He pulled out printouts of her public statements. And then there's this. He held up a tweet for her to see. It's all about the Benjamin's baby. Your words, from February 2019, suggesting that American support for Israel is based on Jewish money. He sat that down and picked up another. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. Your words, from 2012. Another one comparing Israel to Nazi Germany. Your words. On multiple occasions. He set the stack down. Jewish organizations across the political spectrum, left, right, and center, have called these statements anti-Semitic, not just anti-Israel, but truly anti-Semitic. There's a clear difference there, and you've consistently crossed that line." He leaned forward, intent. "And every single one of these statements, every position you've taken, benefits Qatar, benefits Hamas, benefits America's allies' enemies, and increasingly, America's own enemies." He paused for a moment. "There's a legal term," he continued, "for someone who advances the interests of a foreign government, who takes positions that align with foreign policy objectives, who receives support from foreign-aligned organizations." He let the quiet stretch out. Then, the words "foreign agent" dropped like bombs. "So, are you a foreign agent, Congresswoman?" Omar shot straight up from her seat. "I will not sit here and be accused of treason by—" "Sit down!" Ted's voice, sharp enough to cut glass, cut her off. "You are under oath right now, before a committee of the United States Senate. Refusing to answer questions isn't an option here. Now, sit down." For a long moment, Omar stayed standing, her chest heaving, her eyes wide and wild. Then, slowly, she took her seat. "The question still stands," Ted said, his voice quiet. "Why do your positions consistently line up so perfectly with Qatar's interests? Why do organizations aligned with Hamas celebrate your statements so much? Why are you the one Congresswoman that America's enemies most want to see succeed?" He paused again. "What exactly do they know about you that we don't?" Silence filled the room. Still, no answer came. Ted then gathered the documents. "The record," he stated, "will show that Congresswoman Omar refused to explain her ties to Qatar, refused to talk about how her positions align with Qatar's foreign policy goals, and refused to clarify why foreign-aligned organizations offer her such enthusiastic support." He then looked directly into the cameras. "America is watching, Congresswoman, and America is asking questions you won't answer. Qatar," he reminded everyone, "funds terrorists. She defends Qatar, and she won't tell us why. Like this video if you want answers." For a long moment, Ilhan Omar just sat there in silence. The air in the hearing room felt thick, heavy, like the moments right before a thunderstorm. 200 people in the gallery sat motionless, worried that any slight movement might break the tension of what was about to unfold. Then something in Omar's posture subtly changed. It began in her shoulders, a squaring, a straightening, the first sign of the defiance that had powered her through every past controversy. Her instinct for survival was clearly kicking in. It was time for the victim card. She knew it always worked. They're never truly ready for the victim card. She had pulled it out 100 times before. Every accusation hurled at her became evidence of Islamophobia. Every investigation turned into proof of racism. Every critic was labeled a bigot who couldn't handle a black Muslim woman in a position of power. It had never failed her. She rose to her feet. The movement was so sudden, it made the front row flinch, but there was nothing frantic or panicked in her action. No, this was calculated, rehearsed, the precise movement of someone who had trained for moments just like this. Senator Cruz, her voice was completely different now. Stronger, the trembling gone, the tears wiped away completely. In their place, there was a righteous fire. "I have sat here for 2 long hours and listened to these attacks, these accusations, this relentless inquisition."
She turned to face the cameras, the gallery, and the millions watching at home, declaring, "I want the American people to truly understand what's really going on in this room." She touched her hijab, a small but deliberate gesture, reminding everyone exactly what she represented. I am a black woman, a Muslim woman, an immigrant woman, a refugee woman. I am everything that people like Senator Cruz fear, everything they desperately want to destroy. Her voice rose, filled with practiced emotion. I arrived in this country from a refugee camp. I had nothing, no home, no future, just the clothes on my back and the hope that America would offer me a chance. She paused. She let that image sink in. And America, she affirmed, truly did give me that chance. I worked hard.
I studied diligently. I believed in this country, even when so many people tried to tell me I didn't belong. I ran for office because I simply wanted to give back. Because I wanted to serve the very country that had saved me. She pointed a finger at Ted. And what is my reward for all of that? These attacks, these accusations, these investigations. Not because I've actually done anything wrong, but purely because of who I am. Because I'm a Muslim woman who dares to speak out. Because I'm a black woman who dares to hold power. Because I'm an immigrant who dares to challenge the establishment. Her eyes began to fill with tears. Calculated tears, of course. The tears she had learned to summon on command. This is what they do to people who look like me. This is the message they want to send to every refugee, every immigrant, every Muslim across America. They're saying, you don't belong here. You will never truly be accepted. No matter what you accomplish, no matter how hard you work, we will always find a way to tear you down. She was now building toward her dramatic crescendo. And now, here's the moment when the victim turns into the hero, but I won't be silenced. I won't be intimidated. I've faced things worse than Ted Cruz. I've faced war. I've faced poverty. I've faced the kind of hatred he can't even imagine. She looked right at the cameras. And I'm still standing. I'll always be standing, because that's what survivors do. That's what refugees do. That's what America, the real America, makes possible. She sat down, breathing hard, her performance complete. In the gallery, someone started clapping. Then another person, then a small wave of applause from her supporters, quickly silenced by the chairman's gavel. AOC was nodding vigorously. Clay was wiping her eyes. The squad was with her. The resistance was with her. She had turned the narrative. It worked. She thought, it always works. She looked at Ted Cruz. He was writing something on his notepad. Calm, unhurried, as if he hadn't heard a word, she said. Omar felt a flicker of uncertainty. Why isn't he reacting, Senator Cruz? Her voice was sharp, challenging. Nothing to say? Perhaps you realize how this looks, attacking a refugee, a Muslim woman on camera. Ted looked up, and Omar saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. He was smiling. Not a cruel smile, not a mocking one. It was the satisfied smile of a chess player who'd watched his opponent make exactly the move he was hoping for. Are you finished, Congresswoman? I believe I've made my point. Ted nodded slowly. Good. He set down his pen. Because I've been waiting for that speech. The triumph drained from Omar's face. I was counting on it. Actually, it's what you always do. And now everyone watching knows exactly who you are. She thought the victim card would save her. It always had before. But Ted Cruz had been waiting for it. What happens next changes everything. Ted Cruz stood. His movement was slow, deliberate. The movement of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey and saw no need to rush. Let me explain what just happened, Congresswoman, for everyone watching at home. He walked toward her table, each step measured, each footfall echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. I presented documented evidence of campaign finance fraud. $2.8 million funneled to your husband's company. He stopped. Your response? Islamophobia. He took another step. I presented documented evidence of potential immigration fraud. School records listing Ahmed Elmi as your brother. Another step. Your response? Racism. Step. I presented documented evidence that you minimized the worst terrorist attack in American history. Step. Your response? They're attacking me because I'm a Muslim. Step. I presented documented evidence of tax fraud. Filing jointly with the wrong spouse for 2 consecutive years. Step. Your response? This is what they do to people who look like me. Step. I presented documented evidence of foreign influence, positions that aligned perfectly with Qatar and Hamas. He stopped directly in front of her table. Your response? A speech about being a refugee. He turned to face the cameras. This is Ilhan Omar's playbook, America. This is the only card she knows how to play. Evidence becomes Islamophobia. Documentation becomes racism. Facts become attacks on refugees. He turned back to Omar. For years, it's worked. Journalists backed down when you called them bigots. Investigators dropped cases when you claimed racism. Your opponents were afraid to push because they didn't want to be called Islamophobes. He shook his head. Not today. He walked back toward his table. Let me be crystal clear about something. I haven't mentioned your religion once. Not once in 2 hours. I've talked about FEC filings, tax returns, school records, financial documents. None of those things have a religion. He turned back to face her. Numbers aren't Islamophobic, Congresswoman. Documents aren't racist. Facts don't care about your identity. He picked up the stack of evidence. $2.8 million to your husband, documented. He held up each item as he named it. School records listing Ahmed Elmi as your brother. Documented. Tax returns filed with the wrong spouse. Documented. Some people did something on video. Documented. Positions aligning with Qatar. Documented. He set down the stack. You want to make this about identity? Fine. Let me tell you about identity. He leaned forward. Your identity isn't refugee. Your identity isn't Muslim. Your identity isn't a woman of color. He paused. Your identity is fraud. The word cracked through the room like a whip. That's what the evidence shows. Not racism, not Islamophobia. Fraud. Documented, exposed, undeniable. He straightened. You've spent your career hiding behind your identity, using your background as a shield, weaponizing victimhood against anyone who questioned you. He shook his head. Today, that shield finally shattered because you came up against someone unafraid to cut through all the bigotry accusations. Someone who understood that the truth would stand no matter what names you threw around. He looked her straight in the eye. The victim card just doesn't work when the evidence is this undeniable. Crying Islamophobia won't make FEC filings vanish. Playing the race card won't magically erase tax fraud either. He paused, and America just saw it all unfold. They watched you attempt to hide behind your identity as the facts became impossible to deny. They watched you play the victim when the proof was simply overwhelming. He turned to face the cameras. That's precisely who Ilhan Omar is. That's literally all she has. When faced with the truth, she accuses the truth-teller of bigotry. When confronted with documentation, she claims victimhood. He then turned back to Omar. It worked for years, but it won't work today. Omar's face had gone completely white. Her mouth hung open, but no words managed to come out. For the very first time in her political career, the victim card had utterly failed, leaving her with absolutely nothing. She tried to play the victim. He was just waiting for it. He exposed her entire playbook, live on national television. Just like this. If you're tired of identity politics being used to shield crimes, then the first move came from the gallery. AOC stood up. Omar watched it unfold, seeing her most famous ally, her closest congressional friend, her partner in the squad, slowly rise from her seat. Their eyes met for just a fleeting moment. Then AOC looked away, collected her belongings, and started heading for the exit. Alexandria. Omar's voice was sharp, desperate. AOC didn't turn, didn't even slow down. She just pushed through the door and vanished. The sound of that door closing echoed loudly in the sudden silence. Then Rashida Tlaib stood. The same movement, the same avoidance of eye contact, the same walk toward the exit. Rashida, gone. Then Ayanna Pressley, rising, walking, leaving. One by one, the squad members who had entered with such solidarity, such unity, such sisterhood, abandoned the woman they had sworn to stand by. The gallery was emptying. The support base was crumbling. The coalition was dissolving in real time. Ted watched. "Your colleagues are leaving, Congresswoman." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. It was the gentleness of someone who truly understood just how devastating this moment truly was. The squad, the women who came to Congress with you, who built their brand right alongside yours, who stood by you through every scandal, every accusation, every controversy. He gestured at the rapidly emptying gallery. "Look at them run." Omar didn't respond. She couldn't. She was watching them leave. The women she had called sisters, the allies she had trusted completely, were abandoning her on live television for the entire world to see. Her chief of staff approached the witness table, leaned down, and urgently whispered, "We need to end your testimony. Now. Leadership is calling. They're not asking." Omar waved her away, but the message was crystal clear. Her own party wanted her gone. They wanted this over. They wanted to distance themselves before the damage spread any further. "They know what's coming," Ted said quietly. "The investigations, the subpoenas, the criminal referrals. They definitely don't want their names tied to yours when those indictments finally come down." He shook his head. The squad was supposed to change Washington. 4 women of color who would speak truth to power. That was their brand. That was their promise. He paused. "But you didn't speak truth. You hid behind your identity while committing fraud. You played the victim while simultaneously victimizing the very country that saved you. And now, the truth is speaking back." He gestured at the empty seats where the squad had just been. "They're running while they can still deny knowing anything, while they can still distance themselves, while they can still save their own careers." He looked at Omar. "You're all alone now, Congresswoman. Completely alone. The people who swore to stand by you forever have decided that forever ended today." Omar's eyes were wet again. But these weren't calculated tears. These were real. The tears of someone watching everything they'd painstakingly built simply collapse around them. This is political." "It's not political. It's documented." Ted's voice was calm, final. "Every single accusation I made is backed by evidence. Every charge is officially in the record. This isn't about politics. It's about facts. and the facts are devastating. He paused. Your allies didn't run because of politics. They ran because they saw the evidence. And they know there's no defense for it. Even the squad abandoned her. The women she called sisters just walked out on live television. Share this if you believe loyalty built on lies doesn't last. Ted Cruz returned to his seat. The chamber had grown quiet. The kind of quiet that always comes right before an ending. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, making your own heartbeat loudly audible. Congresswoman Omar. His voice was calm now, almost sad. The voice of someone delivering a eulogy. Let me summarize what we've established today. He didn't need the documents anymore. He had them memorized. Campaign finance fraud. $2.8 million funneled to your husband's consulting firm. Luxury travel billed as campaign expenses. Donor money used to fund a lifestyle your constituents could never afford. He paused. Immigration fraud. Evidence suggesting you married your brother to help him obtain citizenship benefits. A fraud against the very system that saved your life as a refugee. Another pause. Disrespect for American tragedy. Some people did something. The worst terrorist attack in our nation's history, reduced to nothing by a member of Congress. He continued, tax fraud, filing joint returns with a man who wasn't your legal spouse for 2 consecutive years, federal crimes that would destroy an ordinary American's life. His voice hardened slightly. And foreign influence, positions that align perfectly with Qatar, with Hamas, with the enemies of America and its allies, and support from organizations linked to foreign governments, along with questions you refused to answer about why. He let the list settle over the room like a shroud. This country took you in, Congresswoman, when you were a child with nothing. A refugee from a war zone. Nowhere to go, no future, no hope. His voice dropped. America opened its doors, gave you safety when your homeland offered only death, gave you education when you had no access to schools, gave you opportunity when you had no future, gave you a seat in the United States Congress, a privilege that billions of people around the world can only dream of. He paused. And you've spent your career defrauding it, disrespecting it, aligning yourself with foreign interests that wish it harm. He looked at her directly. You're not a refugee success story, Congresswoman. One beat. You're not a symbol of what America makes possible. 2 beats. You're a fraud. The word hung in the air. A fraud from Minneapolis, who used identity politics to hide crimes, who wrapped herself in victimhood while victimizing the country that saved her, who played the refugee card while defrauding the refugee system. He shook his head. The story was supposed to be inspiring. A girl from a war zone who became a congresswoman. That was supposed to be your legacy. Proof that America works. Proof that anyone can succeed here. His voice hardened. But you turned that story into something else. A cover for fraud. A shield against accountability. A weapon against anyone who dared to ask questions. He paused. America gave you everything, Congresswoman. Final line. Quiet, devastating. And you took everything you could steal. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, the chairman's gavel banging uselessly, camera flashes like lightning, complete pandemonium. But Ilhan Omar heard none of it. She sat frozen in her chair. The woman who had built a career on defiance, who had turned every attack into evidence of bigotry, who had used her identity as an impenetrable shield for years, frozen. Her mouth was open, forming words that wouldn't come. Her eyes were wide, staring at nothing. The fraud had been exposed, and no amount of identity politics would ever put the mask back on. You're a fraud from Minneapolis. America gave her everything. She took everything she could steal. Share this with every American who believes in accountability. The breakdown was total. It started with her face. The mask, the defiant victim-turned-warrior mask that she had worn through years of controversy, didn't just crack. It shattered completely, irreparably. What remained was something cameras had never captured before, something her critics had imagined but never seen. Ilhan Omar, broken. Her skin went gray beneath her hijab. The rich brown color that had projected confidence and power drained away, replaced by something ashen, something that looked like illness, like defeat made visible. Her mouth kept moving, trying to form the words that had always saved her. The accusations of Islamophobia, the claims of racism, the victim narrative that had protected her through everything. This is nothing. The words wouldn't come. For years, she had silenced critics with a single accusation, had ended careers with claims of bigotry, had turned investigations into evidence of persecution. And now, when she needed those words most, they had abandoned her too. Like the squad, like everyone else, her body followed. Her squared shoulders collapsed. Her lifted chin dropped. The posture of defiance that she had maintained for 2 hours crumbled into something smaller, something defeated. Her hands, which had gestured with righteous anger throughout her victim speech, now trembled visibly against the table. The cameras captured her every tremble, every visible sign of the internal collapse taking place within her. "We need to leave." Her chief of staff was right there next to her. His voice was urgent yet gentle. It was the kind of voice you use when speaking to someone in shock. "Now, we really need to leave now." Omar simply nodded. The movement felt mechanical, automatic. It was the nod of someone who wasn't fully present anymore. They helped her to her feet. Her legs were shaky. For a moment, she swayed, and her aide grabbed her arm to prevent her from falling. The woman who had stood so defiantly just minutes before couldn't even stand on her own now. They headed for the side exit, the door specifically kept for witnesses needing to avoid the press. This was the door for people who had something they wanted to hide. The side door, Omar thought faintly. The words drifted through her mind like scattered debris. "I'm leaving through the side door like a criminal, like someone guilty." She paused at the door. A final flicker of defiance, one last refusal to let this truly be the end. She looked back toward Ted Cruz. He was neatly arranging his documents, calm and methodical, with the same steady demeanor he'd kept the entire time. No celebration, no gloating, just finished. She opened her mouth. It was one last attempt. "You don't understand what it means to—" Her voice broke. It actually broke. The sound echoed loudly in the otherwise silent room. It was the sound of something shattering. She couldn't finish her thought. Ted looked up and met her gaze. "I understand exactly what it means, Congresswoman. It means America gave you everything. Safety, opportunity, a seat in Congress, and you took everything you could possibly steal." She had absolutely no response. The woman who had built a whole career on words, on powerful speeches, on accusations that often silenced her critics, was now completely lost for words. She had nothing left. She turned around, walked through that side door, and vanished. The back room was pure chaos. Yet it was hushed. Phones buzzed non-stop. Aides whispered urgently. The entire machinery of political survival was spinning at top speed, but couldn't seem to gain any traction. Ilhan Omar sat in a chair against the wall, simply sitting there, staring blankly ahead. "The caucus is calling." Her chief of staff's voice remained gentle. "They want to discuss next steps. The leadership wants a statement. There are requests for—" He had everything. The words came out hollow, empty shells of words. What? Cruz? He had everything. Every document, every filing, every timeline. He had it all. She stared down at her hands. "I've beaten them all. Every attack, every investigation. Every time they came for me, I called them racists, and they backed down. I called them Islamophobes, and they apologized. I played the victim, and everyone rallied to protect me." She closed her eyes. He didn't back down. He just kept reading documents. And when I tried the victim speech, when I did the thing that always works, he smiled. He smiled because he was waiting for it. He wanted me to do it. She opened her eyes. He called me a fraud. Her aide remained silent. There was truly nothing to say. A fraud from Minneapolis. She was quiet for a long moment. "America gave me everything." That's what he said, and he was right. This country saved my life. It gave me a future. It made me a congresswoman. A single tear rolled down her cheek. And I... She couldn't finish, but there was no need to. They both understood exactly what she was, and now, so did everyone else. Ted Cruz stayed in the hearing room even as the chaos settled down. Reporters crowded around him, cameras still rolling, microphones shoved forward. "Senator Cruz, any comment on what happened today?" Ted thoughtfully considered the question. Congresswoman Omar has spent years hiding behind identity politics. Today, she faced documented evidence, FEC filings, tax returns, immigration records, school documents, facts that simply don't care about accusations of racism or Islamophobia. He slowly shook his head. The evidence speaks for itself. What happens next is entirely up to the Department of Justice. Do you feel any sympathy for her? Ted paused, a look of genuine consideration on his face. "I feel sympathy for the refugees who truly respect the country that takes them in. I feel sympathy for the Muslim Americans who serve this country honorably and are embarrassed by her conduct. I feel sympathy for the 9/11 families she casually dismissed as some people did something. I feel sympathy for every immigrant who followed the rules while she allegedly broke them." He gathered his documents. As for her personally, she had every single chance to live honorably. This country gave her everything, literally everything. She chose to defraud it instead. He then walked toward the exit. "America is the most generous country in the entire history of the world. We welcome more refugees than any other nation. We offer them opportunities that simply don't exist anywhere else. We don't ask for much in return. Just follow the laws, respect the country, and contribute to the society that embraced you." He paused at the door. She couldn't even manage that. He glanced at the cameras one final time. The Minneapolis fraud. That's her lasting legacy now. Not a refugee success story. Not a trailblazing congresswoman fraud. He strode through the front door, into the cameras, and into the light. His head held high. It was the walk of someone who had truly done his job. Ilhan Omar originally came to America as a refugee. This country literally saved her life. Yet, she spent her entire career repaying that debt with nothing but fraud. From campaign money redirected to her husband, to immigration fraud involving her brother, tax fraud, with the wrong spouse, and even casually dismissing 9/11. She was defending nations that funded terrorism, all while actively attacking America's allies. That became her true legacy. That's what she ultimately built with the incredible opportunity America had given her. Ted Cruz, however, did what nobody else dared to do. He completely ignored the accusations of racism. He pushed right through the cries of Islamophobia. He simply let the documents do the talking. He let the evidence pile up. He let the undeniable facts utterly destroy her carefully constructed narrative. And when all those facts were laid bare, the woman who had silenced her critics for years with accusations of bigotry finally ran completely out of cards to play. The victim card just doesn't work when the evidence against you is truly overwhelming. Identity politics, in the end, cannot erase federal crimes, and the truth, eventually, always comes out, even for the fraud from Minneapolis. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. You truly are a patriot. If this story moved you, and if you believe that absolutely no one is above the law, regardless of what they look like or where they came from, please do 3 things. First, go ahead and subscribe, because more accountability is definitely coming. Second, please share this video. Every American truly needs to see what happens when someone finally refuses to back down from baseless accusations of bigotry. Third, leave a comment and tell us which politician you want to see held accountable next. God bless you. God bless America. And God bless everyone who is willing to stand for the truth.